The stars had always been quiet in this part of the galaxy. For 9,000 years, the Galactic Concord had maintained peace among 12 different species. They had built trading routes that stretched across 100,000 light years. They had created laws that protected the weak and controlled the strong. They believed they understood the universe and everything in it. They were wrong. Ambassador Thyrus stood on the command deck of the diplomatic vessel Harmony of Stars. Her body was made of living crystal, a beautiful blue color that shifted and changed with her emotions. Right now, her crystal form glowed with soft confidence. She had done this many times before. First contact with new species was her specialty. She had welcomed 7 different civilizations into the Concord during her long career. Each time, the pattern was the same. The new species would be nervous and confused. They would not understand the size and power of the Concord. Thyrus would calm them down, explain the rules, and guide them into their new life among the stars. It was simple work for someone with her experience. "Ambassador," said her communications officer, a small furry creature named Brel. "We are receiving a signal from the unknown vessel. They are responding to our greeting." "Put it through," Thyrus said. She straightened her crystalline form, making herself look as impressive as possible. First impressions were important. The screen in front of her flickered to life. She saw a creature she had never seen before. It had soft skin the color of brown earth. 2 eyes sat in the front of its flat face. A small nose. A mouth that moved in strange ways when it spoke. Hair grew from the top of its head, black and cut short. The creature wore some kind of uniform, dark blue with small metal decorations on the chest. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Nations ship Perseverance," the creature said. "We represent the people of Earth. We come in peace and hope to establish friendly relations with your civilization." Thyrus felt her crystal form glow a little brighter with amusement. The creature's words were so formal, so careful. She could hear the nervousness in its voice. This species clearly understood how small they were compared to the vast galaxy around them. Good. That would make things easier. "Greetings, Captain Chen," Thyrus replied. Her voice was like music, created by vibrations in her crystal body. "I am Ambassador Thyrus of the Galactic Concord. We welcome you to the greater community of sentient beings. Please tell us about your people." The captain on the screen nodded. "We are humans from a planet called Earth. We have only recently developed faster-than-light travel. This is our first contact with another intelligent species. We are very excited to meet you." Thyrus noticed something in the captain's eyes. The human was studying her carefully, taking in every detail of her crystal form. There was curiosity there, yes, but also something else. Something sharp and calculating. Thyrus dismissed the thought. All new species were nervous during first contact. It meant nothing. "Your ship," Thyrus said. "It is quite impressive for a species new to space travel. What is its purpose?" "The Perseverance is a light escort frigate," Captain Chen said. "It is designed for protection and exploration." "A military vessel?" Thyrus asked. Her crystal form flickered with slight concern. Military vessels were not uncommon, of course. Many species maintained defensive forces, but something about the way the human said light escort frigate caught her attention. The words seemed almost apologetic. "All of our deep space vessels have some military capability," the captain explained. "Space is dangerous. We like to be prepared." "Very sensible," Thyrus said, though she made a mental note to have her science team examine the human ship more closely. "We would like to propose a formal meeting. A delegation from your vessel could come aboard the Harmony of Stars. We could begin discussions about your species joining the Galactic Concord." "We would be honored, Ambassador," Captain Chen said. "When would you like us to arrive?" "In one standard cycle, approximately 12 of your hours, according to our analysis of your transmission patterns. This will give us time to prepare proper accommodations for your biology." The human captain nodded again. 12 hours, we will be ready. Perseverance out." The screen went dark. Thyris turned to her crew with satisfaction. That went well. Begin preparations for the delegation. Standard first contact protocols. Yes, Ambassador, said Brel. The small creature's whiskers twitched with excitement. A new species, how wonderful. Thyris moved to her private chamber, leaving her crew to their work. She wanted to review what little information they had gathered about these humans. Their ship was small by Concord standards, barely 200 meters long. It carried a crew of just over 300. The technology seemed crude but functional, nothing special, nothing to worry about. She called up an image of the human ship on her personal screen. It was a blocky, angular thing, no elegance in its design. It looked like it had been built for function, not beauty. The hull was covered in what appeared to be armor plating, thick and heavy. Thyris found that odd. Most species did not armor their exploration vessels so heavily. There was no need. Space was vast and mostly empty. The chances of encountering danger were small. But humans apparently thought differently. She examined the ship's external weapons. Her sensors had detected several turrets and missile launchers. Again, more than most exploration vessels carried. But Thyris reminded herself that humans were new to space. They did not yet understand how safe the galaxy was under Concord protection. They would learn in time. Her door chimed. Enter, she said. Kethril, her chief science officer, stepped into the room. He was also Velkari, his crystal form a deep green that marked him as a scholar. Right now, his crystals were pulsing with barely contained excitement. Ambassador, I have completed a preliminary analysis of the human vessel, he said. Their technology is fascinating, primitive in many ways but surprisingly effective. Their faster-than-light drive uses a completely different principle than ours. They call it a fold drive. It literally folds space to move from one point to another. Interesting, Thyris said, but not relevant to our diplomatic mission. Is there anything I should know before meeting their delegation? Only that they seem very eager to learn about us. Their communications have included many questions about Concord history, culture, and biology. They are curious creatures. Curiosity is good. It shows intelligence and openness. This should be an easy integration. Kethril's green crystals flickered. There is one more thing, Ambassador. I noticed something unusual about their ship's internal layout. A significant portion of the vessel is dedicated to something called an armory. My initial scans suggest it contains a large number of personal weapons. Thyris waved a crystalline appendage dismissively. Many species carry weapons for protection. The Morathi hunters never travel without their plasma lances. It is a cultural preference, nothing more. Of course, Ambassador, Kethril said, but his crystals continued to pulse with something that looked almost like unease. Shall I conduct a full bioscan of the human crew before the delegation arrives? Standard first contact protocol requires us to understand their biology before allowing them aboard. Yes, proceed with the scan, and make sure our medical team is prepared for any biological needs our guests might have. I want this meeting to go perfectly. Kethril bowed his crystalline form and left the room. Thyris returned to her review of the human ship, but her mind was already moving ahead to the diplomatic meeting. She would need to explain the Concord's laws and customs. She would need to assess whether humans were ready to join the galactic community. Most importantly, she would need to determine what resources and knowledge humans could contribute to the Concord. Every species had something valuable to offer. The Velkari had their crystal technology and diplomatic expertise. The Morathi had their hunting skills and warrior traditions. The Brel had their gift for communication and languages. What would humans bring? Their crude but effective technology, their apparent fondness for weapons, or something else entirely. Thyris hoped it would be something useful. The galaxy was a big place, and the Concord was always looking for new members to strengthen its ranks. She spent the next several hours reviewing first contact protocols and preparing her welcoming speech. She practiced the human greeting, a strange ritual where two individuals clasped hands and moved them up and down. The gesture felt awkward with her crystalline appendages, but she wanted to show respect for human customs. As the hours passed, reports from her crew came in regularly. The Perseverance was maintaining its position, making no aggressive moves. The humans had sent over detailed information about their biology and dietary needs. They were carbon-based life forms who breathed oxygen and consumed organic matter for energy. Nothing unusual there. Many species shared similar biological traits. The only strange thing was their activity level. According to sensor readings, the humans were almost constantly in motion. They did not seem to rest for long periods like most species. Even in the middle of what should have been their sleep cycle, many humans remained active, working on various tasks throughout the ship. Perhaps they are excited about the first contact, Thyras mused. They will calm down once things become routine. Finally, the time for the meeting approached. Thyras made her way to the main airlock, where her delegation was assembled. She had chosen representatives from several conquered species, a Brel communications specialist, a Morathi security officer, a plant-like Verdani biologist, and two other Velkari diplomats. A diverse group that would show humans the richness of the galactic community they were about to join. Remember, Thyras told her team, these are a new species. They will be nervous and easily confused. Speak slowly and clearly. Avoid sudden movements. We want them to feel welcome. The Morathi security officer, a large reptilian creature named Grath, clicked his teeth in what passed for laughter among his kind. You speak as if they are children, Ambassador. Surely they cannot be so fragile. All new species are fragile in their own way, Thyras replied. Our job is to guide them gently into the light of civilization. She turned to face the airlock, her crystal form glowing with confident blue light. In just a few minutes, she would meet the first humans ever to set foot on a conquered vessel. It would be a historic moment, the beginning of a new friendship between species. Thyras had no idea how wrong she was. The airlock indicator turned green, signaling that the human shuttle had docked successfully. Thyras arranged her crystalline features into what she hoped was a welcoming expression. Behind her, her delegation stood in formal poses, ready to greet their new friends. The airlock door slid open with a soft hiss. And Thyras got her first real look at humans. Captain Sarah Chen stepped through first. She was smaller than Thyras had expected, barely reaching the ambassador's midsection. Her skin was smooth and soft-looking, completely unarmored. Her eyes were brown, warm, and intelligent. She wore the same dark blue uniform from the video call, but now Thyras could see more details. The fabric looked tough and practical. The metal decorations on her chest were apparently military awards of some kind. Behind the captain came 4 other humans, 2 males and 2 females, all wearing similar uniforms. They moved with a strange grace that Thyras found hard to describe. It was not the careful movement of prey animals trying to avoid notice. It was something else entirely. They moved like they owned the space around them, like they belonged wherever they happened to be standing. Ambassador Thyras, Captain Chen said, extending her hand. Thank you for welcoming us aboard your beautiful ship. We are honored to be here. Thyras reached out with her crystalline appendage and attempted the human greeting. The captain's hand was warm and soft, but her grip was surprisingly firm. Strong, even. Stronger than Thyras had expected from such a small creature. Welcome, Captain Chen, Thyras said. Welcome to the harmony of stars and welcome to the Galactic Concord. We have much to discuss. She turned to lead the way to the diplomatic chamber, and as she did, she noticed something that made her pause. The Morathi security officer, Grath, was standing completely still. His reptilian eyes were fixed on the humans with an expression Thyras had never seen on his face before. It took her a moment to recognize it. Fear. Grath, who had hunted the most dangerous beasts on a dozen worlds, who had never shown fear of anything in all the years Thyras had known him, was afraid of these small, soft-skinned creatures. Thyras filed the observation away for later consideration. Right now, she had a diplomatic mission to complete. Whatever had spooked Grath could wait until after the formal introductions were finished. "Please follow me," she said to the humans. "We have prepared refreshments and a comfortable space for our discussions. I hope you will find our hospitality acceptable." "I'm sure we will," Captain Chen replied with a smile. "We brought some gifts from Earth as well, coffee and chocolate. We thought you might like to try something from our world." "How thoughtful," Thyras said. She led the group down the corridor toward the diplomatic chamber, her crystal form glowing with what she hoped looked like pleased satisfaction. But in the back of her mind, a small seed of doubt had been planted. Something about these humans was not quite what it seemed, something that made even a Morathi warrior afraid. Thyras decided she would have Kethril complete that bioscan as quickly as possible. She wanted to know exactly what they were dealing with before this mission went any further. She had no way of knowing that the bioscan results would change everything she thought she knew about the universe. The diplomatic chamber was the most beautiful room on the Harmony of Stars. Crystal sculptures decorated the walls, each one created by master Velkhari artists over centuries. Soft lighting made everything glow with warmth and peace. Comfortable seating had been arranged for all the different species present, including special chairs designed to accommodate the human form. Thyras gestured for everyone to sit. "Please, make yourselves comfortable. We have much to discuss, but there is no rush. The Conquered believes in taking time to build proper relationships." Captain Chen settled into her chair with what looked like genuine appreciation. "This is beautiful, Ambassador. Your artists are incredibly talented." "Thank you. The Velkhari have always valued beauty and harmony. It is the foundation of our culture." The other humans were looking around the room with obvious curiosity. Their eyes moved constantly, taking in every detail. One of them, a young male with pale skin and red hair, was staring at the crystal sculptures with something like wonder. "Lieutenant Commander Harris," Captain Chen said, noticing his distraction. "Focus, please." "Sorry, Captain," the young man said, but his eyes kept drifting back to the sculptures. Thyras found herself warming to these strange creatures. They were curious and appreciative, two qualities she valued highly. Perhaps this first contact would go smoothly after all. "Before we begin our formal discussions," Thyras said, "I would like to perform a standard bioscan of your delegation. This is normal procedure for all first contact situations. It helps us understand your biology so we can ensure your safety and comfort while aboard our vessel." "Of course," Captain Chen said. "We expected as much. We've already shared our basic biological data with your team." "Yes, and we appreciate that. But a direct scan will give us more detailed information. I hope you understand." "Completely. Please proceed." Thyras signaled to Kethril, who had entered the room quietly and was standing near the back. He activated his scanning device, a small crystal that floated in the air and emitted a soft blue light. "This will not hurt," Thyras assured the humans. "You may feel a slight tingling sensation, but nothing more." The humans sat calmly as the scanner moved over them. They showed no fear or nervousness. If anything, they seemed almost bored by the procedure. Thyras watched Kethril's face as the scan progressed. At first, his green crystals pulsed with normal curiosity. Then they began to pulse faster. Then they stopped pulsing entirely, going dark with what could only be described as shock. "Kethril," Thyras asked quietly, "is something wrong?" Her science officer did not respond. He was staring at his scanner with an expression of complete disbelief. His crystalline form had gone almost completely dark, a sign of extreme distress among the Velkhari. "Kethril," Thyras said more firmly, "report." "Ambassador," Kethril said, his voice barely above a whisper, I need to speak with you privately, immediately." Thyras felt the first real stirring of alarm. In all her years of working with Kethril, she had never seen him react this way. Whatever the scan had revealed, it had shaken him to his core. "Please excuse me for a moment," Thyras said to the human delegation. "A small technical matter requires my attention. My colleagues will keep you company." She followed Kethril out of the diplomatic chamber and into a small side room. As soon as the door closed behind them, she turned to face him. "What is it? What did you find?" Kethril's green crystals began pulsing erratically, a sign of extreme agitation. "Ambassador, I ran the bioscan 3 times. The results are the same each time. I do not understand how this is possible." "Just tell me what you found." Kethril looked at her with eyes that held something very close to terror. "Ambassador Thyras, every single human in that room registers as a Class 7 apex predator." Thyras felt her own crystal form go cold. "That cannot be correct. Run the scan again." "I ran it 3 times, Ambassador. The results are consistent. These creatures, these humans, they are among the most dangerous life forms we have ever encountered." Thyras stared at her science officer, trying to process what he was telling her. Class 7, apex predator. The most dangerous classification in the Concord's biological database, reserved for creatures that sat at the absolute top of their food chains, creatures that no other species dared to challenge. And she had just welcomed 5 of them aboard her ship. "Tell me everything," Thyras said quietly. "Tell me exactly what the scan revealed." And Kethril began to speak, and with every word, Thyras felt her understanding of the universe crumble around her. Kethril's green crystal form had gone almost completely dark. Only small flickers of light moved through his body as he struggled to explain what his scans had revealed. Thyras stood perfectly still, her blue crystals pulsing with growing dread as she listened. "You must understand, Ambassador," Kethril said, his voice barely above a whisper. "In all my years as a science officer, I have never seen biological readings like these. The humans are. They are unlike anything in our databases." "Start from the beginning," Thyras commanded. "Tell me everything." Kethril activated a small holographic display, showing the biological data he had collected. First, their classification as apex predators. The Concord uses a scale of 1 to 10 to measure a species' position in their native food chain. A Class 1 species would be simple prey animals, hunted by everything. A Class 5 species would be balanced, sometimes predator, sometimes prey. The Morathi hunters, the most dangerous species currently in the Concord, are classified as Class 4. "And humans are Class 7, Thyras asked, still struggling to believe it. "Class 7 apex predators," Kethril confirmed. "On their home planet they have no natural predators. Nothing hunts them. Nothing challenges them. They sit at the absolute top of their world's food chain, and they have done so for thousands of years." Thyras felt her crystalline body grow cold. How is that possible? They are so small, so soft. They have no natural weapons, no claws, no fangs, no armor. "That is what makes them so terrifying, Ambassador. They did not need those things. They developed something far more dangerous." Kethril changed the display to show a diagram of the human body. "Humans are what we call persistence predators. They do not chase their prey at high speed and catch it quickly like the Morathi do. Instead, they pursue their prey for hours, days, or even weeks. They simply refuse to stop. Their bodies are designed for endless movement. They can walk or run for incredible distances without rest. No matter how fast their prey runs, no matter where it hides, the humans keep coming. Eventually, the prey collapses from exhaustion, and then the humans catch it." Thyras tried to imagine it, a soft, slow creature following its prey across endless distances, never stopping, never giving up, always getting closer. It was a hunting style unlike anything she had ever heard of. "Their bodies have adapted perfectly for this purpose," Kethril continued. They have a cooling system that allows them to regulate their temperature even during extended physical activity. They sweat, a fluid that evaporates from their skin and removes heat from their bodies. Most species would overheat and die after running for short periods. Humans can run for hours in the hot sun without suffering any ill effects. That explains their hunting method, Thyra said slowly. But surely there must be weaknesses. Every species has weaknesses. That is what I thought as well, so I scanned for vulnerabilities. Kethral's green crystals flickered with something that looked almost like fear. Ambassador, I could not find any meaningful weaknesses. Every aspect of their biology seems designed for survival. He pulled up another display. Their bones, for example. Human bones are incredibly strong, stronger than many metals we use in construction. A human skeleton can withstand impacts that would shatter Velkari crystal. They can fall from significant heights and walk away with minor injuries. Their bones are also filled with a substance that produces their blood cells, which means even if a bone breaks, it will heal itself over time. Their bones heal themselves, Thyra asked in disbelief. All of them heal themselves, not just their bones, their entire bodies. If a human is cut, the wound will close on its own. If they are bruised, the damage repairs itself. If they break a bone, given enough time, it will mend back together. They can recover from injuries that would be fatal to almost any other species. Thyra thought of the medical technology the Conquered used to treat injuries. Crystal therapy, regeneration chambers, tissue reconstruction. All of it required advanced technology and skilled operators, but humans apparently did not need any of that. Their bodies simply fixed themselves. There is more, Kethral said. Their immune systems are remarkably aggressive. They are filled with microscopic organisms called bacteria, some of which are harmless but many of which are deadly. Their bodies have learned to live with these organisms, to use them, to weaponize them. If a human bites another creature, the wound will almost certainly become infected. The bacteria in the human mouth will attack the victim's body, causing sickness and often death. They use disease as a weapon. Thyra felt sick at the thought. Not intentionally, or at least not always. It is simply a natural consequence of their biology. Their bodies are walking ecosystems of dangerous microorganisms. They do not even notice. They have adapted to coexist with creatures that would kill most other species. Kethral changed the display again, showing what appeared to be the human nervous system. Now we come to perhaps the most disturbing aspect of human biology, their brains. What about their brains? Human brains are divided into 3 distinct sections, each one developed at a different point in their evolutionary history. The oldest section, the brain stem, controls basic survival functions. The middle section handles emotions and social behavior. But the newest section, the cerebral cortex, is where they do their thinking, their planning, their creating. That sounds similar to many intelligent species, Thyra said. Yes, but here is the crucial difference. In most species, these brain sections work together in harmony. When fear is triggered, the entire brain focuses on survival. When calm is restored, the entire brain returns to normal function. But humans are different. In humans, these brain sections often work against each other. A human can feel fear in one part of their brain while simultaneously forcing another part to ignore that fear and take action anyway. Thyra struggled to understand. They can override their own survival instincts. Exactly. A human can be terrified genuinely, completely terrified, and still force themselves to fight, to run toward danger to protect others. They call this quality courage or bravery. It is the ability to act against their own natural instincts for self-preservation. But why would any creature evolve such an ability? It goes against all principles of survival. Because humans are social animals, Kethral explained. They survive not as individuals but as groups. A human who runs toward danger to protect their family or tribe may die, but their sacrifice ensures the survival of the group. Over millions of years, this behavior became embedded in their biology. Humans who were willing to face death for their communities produced more surviving offspring than those who fled. Natural selection favored the brave. Thyras felt her crystal form flickering with confused light. Everything Kethril was telling her contradicted her understanding of how biology worked. No species should be able to ignore its survival instincts. No species should be able to heal from almost any wound. No species should be able to run forever without stopping. But apparently, humans could do all of these things. "I have not yet told you the worst part," Kethril said quietly. "There is something worse." "Yes, the sleep cycles." Kethril brought up a new display comparing sleep patterns across different species. Most sentient species require significant periods of rest. The Velkari need 12 hours of crystal resonance every cycle. The Morathi require 14 hours of deep sleep. The Verdani enter a dormant state for 16 hours out of every 28. This is normal. This is healthy. Bodies need time to repair and restore themselves. And humans? Humans sleep between 6 and 8 hours per cycle, sometimes less. Thyras stared at the display in shock. That cannot be correct. They would die of exhaustion. They do not die. They function perfectly well on 6 hours of sleep. Some humans function on even less. There are documented cases of humans staying awake for days at a time when necessary, with no permanent damage to their health. But how? We do not fully understand. It appears that human bodies have evolved to require minimal downtime. Perhaps this is related to their nature as persistent predators. They needed to keep moving, to keep pursuing prey, and could not afford to waste time sleeping. Whatever the reason, the result is clear. Humans have nearly twice as many active hours as most other species. Thyras did the math in her head. If humans only slept for 6 hours, that meant they had 18 hours of activity every cycle. The Velkari had only 12. Over the course of a year, that difference would add up to thousands of extra hours. Thousands of hours that humans could spend working, planning, creating, fighting. No wonder they had developed technology so quickly. No wonder their ship had seemed surprisingly advanced for a species new to space travel. They simply had more time to work with than anyone else. "Ambassador," Kethril said, his voice heavy with concern, "these are not peaceful explorers. I mean, perhaps they are peaceful now, perhaps they genuinely want friendship with the conquered, but their biology tells a different story. They are predators. They are survivors. They are built to endure and overcome anything that stands in their way." "You think they are dangerous?" "I think they are the most dangerous species we have ever encountered. The Morathi are strong and fierce, but they are also predictable. They follow the patterns of predators across the galaxy. They hunt, they kill, they rest. Humans do not follow these patterns. They do not fit into any category we have." Thyras stood in silence for a long moment, processing everything Kethril had told her. In the next room, 5 of these impossible creatures were sitting comfortably, drinking refreshments and making polite conversation with her delegation. They had brought gifts. They had smiled and shaken hands. They had done everything possible to appear friendly and harmless. But now Thyras understood what Grath had seen. The Morathi security officer, with his predator's instincts, had recognized something in the humans that Thyras had missed. He had looked at their soft skin and small bodies and somehow seen past the disguise to the truth beneath. "What do we do?" Thyras asked finally. "We cannot simply refuse to meet with them. They have done nothing wrong." "I do not know, Ambassador. I am a scientist, not a diplomat. I can only tell you what the data shows." "And what does the data show?" Kethril's green crystals went completely dark for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. "The data shows that we have invited apex predators onto our ship. The data shows that if these creatures wanted to harm us, we would be almost powerless to stop them. The data shows that humanity may be the greatest threat the Galactic Conquered has ever faced." or the greatest ally, Thyras said quietly. Kethral looked at her with surprise. Ambassador. Think about it, Kethral. Everything you have described, the endurance, the healing, the courage, the minimal sleep requirements, all of these traits would make humans incredibly valuable allies. If they are as formidable as you suggest, having them on our side could change everything. You would trust such creatures. Thyras thought of Captain Chen's warm smile, of Lieutenant Commander Harris's wonder at the crystal sculptures, of the gift basket of coffee and chocolate sitting on the table in the diplomatic chamber. I do not know yet, she admitted, but I intend to find out. Continue your scans, Kethral. I want to know everything there is to know about human biology. In the meantime, I will return to our guests and continue the diplomatic process. You are not going to cancel the meeting. No, if humans are as dangerous as you say, then we need to understand them. And we need them to understand us. Knowledge is our best protection. Thyras moved toward the door, then paused and looked back at her science officer. Kethral, one more question. In all your scans, did you find anything that suggested hostile intent? Any weapons hidden in their bodies? Any signs of preparation for attack? Kethral shook his head slowly. No, Ambassador. They carry no hidden weapons. Their only unusual biological trait is their sweat, which appears to contain chemicals that might be irritating to some species, but nothing lethal. They came exactly as they presented themselves, as diplomats and explorers. Then we will treat them as such, until they give us reason to do otherwise. Thyras left the small room and walked back toward the diplomatic chamber. Her crystal form was still pulsing with concern, but she forced herself to project calm confidence. The humans would notice any sign of fear or suspicion. She could not afford to reveal what she had learned. As she walked, she thought about everything Kethral had told her. Persistence predators, self-healing bodies, overriding fear, minimal sleep. Each trait alone would make humans formidable. Together, they painted a picture of a species that was almost impossible to defeat. But Thyras had noticed something else in Kethral's data, something that gave her a small spark of hope. The humans' most dangerous traits, their courage, their endurance, their refusal to give up, were all social adaptations. They had evolved not to destroy other species but to protect their own communities. They faced danger so that others could survive. They ran toward fire to save their families. Perhaps that capacity for sacrifice could be directed outward. Perhaps humans could learn to see the conquered as an extended family, a community worth protecting. It was a dangerous gamble, but Thyras had not become the most successful diplomat in the conquered by playing it safe. She reached the door of the diplomatic chamber and paused to compose herself. Then she stepped inside, her crystal form glowing with warm blue light. My apologies for the interruption, she said to the human delegation. A small technical matter that required my attention. Now, where were we? Captain Chen smiled that warm, friendly smile. We were about to tell you about Earth and its history. Would you like to hear about our home world? I would be honored, Thyras said, settling back into her seat. Please tell me everything. And as Captain Chen began to speak about a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star, Thyras listened with new ears. She was no longer hearing the story of a young, innocent species making its first steps into the galaxy. She was hearing the history of apex predators, the story of creatures who had fought and killed, and struggled their way to dominance over an entire world. She was listening to the origin story of monsters. But she was also listening for something else, for hints of compassion, of mercy, of the capacity for kindness that Kethral's data had also revealed. Because if humans were truly as dangerous as the scans suggested, then the conquered's only hope was to find the goodness within them and nurture it. The alternative was too terrible to consider. The meeting continued for several more hours. The humans shared stories of Earth, its vast oceans, its towering mountains, its incredible diversity of life. They spoke of their history, their art, their music, their dreams for the future. They asked questions about the conquered, showing genuine interest in learning about other species and their cultures. Throughout it all, Thyris watched them carefully. She noticed how they moved, how they spoke, how they interacted with each other and with the conquered delegation. She saw the easy way they laughed, the gentle way they touched each other's shoulders, the protective way Captain Chen positioned herself near her crew members. They were predators, yes, but they were also family. And that, Thyris realized, was the key to understanding them. Humans were dangerous because they cared. They would fight to protect what they loved. They would sacrifice themselves for their community. They would never, ever give up. The question was whether the Galactic Conquered could become part of that community. As the meeting finally drew to a close, Captain Chen stood and extended her hand once again to Thyris. "Thank you for your hospitality, Ambassador. This has been one of the most remarkable days in human history. We hope this is the beginning of a long and productive friendship." Thyris took the captain's hand, feeling once again that surprisingly strong grip. "As do we, Captain Chen, as do we." But even as she spoke the words, Thyris knew that everything had changed. The Galactic Conquered would never be the same. The arrival of humanity had opened a door that could never be closed. The only question now was what would come through that door next. In the scanner bay, Kethril was still analyzing the data from the human bioscan, and with each new discovery, his fear grew deeper, because he had not yet told Thyris the most disturbing thing of all. The humans he had scanned were not soldiers. According to their own records, they were scientists, diplomats, and support staff. They were the peaceful representatives of their species, chosen specifically for their gentle nature and diplomatic skills. If these were the peaceful humans, Kethril thought with growing dread, what must the warriors be like? He pulled up the human ship's crew manifest and began searching for any information about their military personnel. What he found made his green crystals go completely dark with terror. The humans had something called Marines aboard the Perseverance. They were specialized soldiers, trained specifically for combat, and according to the ship's records, they made up nearly a third of the crew. Kethril stared at the data in silence, trying to comprehend what it meant. Over 100 human warriors, on a ship they called a light escort frigate. He needed to tell Ambassador Thyris immediately. But even as he prepared to contact her, he knew that this information would only raise more questions. If humans sent this many soldiers on a peaceful first contact mission, how many would they send if they actually expected to fight? The answer, Kethril suspected, was one that the Galactic Conquered was not prepared to hear. The human delegation had returned to the Perseverance, and Thyris had ordered her crew to conduct the most comprehensive scan of the human vessel ever attempted. She wanted to know everything. Every weapon, every system, every secret the ship might hold. The biological data Kethril had gathered had shaken her deeply, and now she needed to understand the technological capabilities of these impossible creatures. What she found was beyond anything she had imagined. "Ambassador," Kethril said, his voice trembling as he presented his findings, "I believe you need to see this yourself." Thyris followed him to the main scanner bay, where half a dozen Velkari technicians were working frantically at their stations. The room was filled with holographic displays showing various sections of the human ship. But everyone's attention was focused on one display in particular, a three-dimensional representation of what the humans called their armory. "That cannot be correct," Thyris said, staring at the display. "Your scanners must be malfunctioning." "I have verified the readings 6 times, Ambassador. They are accurate." The armory took up nearly 15% of the entire ship. It was filled from floor to ceiling with weapons, ammunition, and combat equipment. Thyris recognized some of the items from her studies of primitive warfare: projectile launchers, explosive devices, bladed implements. but there were many more items she had never seen before. "What are those?" she asked, pointing to a row of large cylindrical objects. "The humans call them missiles, Ambassador. They are self-propelled explosive devices designed to be launched at enemy vessels. Each one contains enough destructive power to vaporize one of our cruisers." "And they have how many?" 47 missiles of that type, plus 123 smaller missiles designed for anti-fighter combat, plus 800 guided bombs, plus 12 nuclear warheads. Thyras felt her crystal form go cold. Nuclear warheads. The humans have nuclear weapons. "Yes, Ambassador. They developed nuclear technology centuries ago, according to their historical records. They used it first to create weapons of mass destruction, then later adapted it for power generation and space travel. They created weapons of mass destruction before they created peaceful applications." Kethral's green crystals flickered with what could only be described as disturbed fascination. "It appears so. The humans have a saying, 'Necessity is the mother of invention.' When they needed to destroy their enemies, they invented nuclear bombs. When they needed to power their cities, they adapted the same technology for peaceful purposes." Thyras tried to process this information. Every other species in the Concord had developed nuclear technology for energy production first, then later, if at all, considered its weapons applications. The idea of deliberately creating devices designed to kill millions of people, to poison the land for generations, to bring about apocalyptic destruction. It was almost impossible to comprehend. And yet, here were the humans, carrying nuclear weapons on a first contact mission, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Show me more," Thyras said quietly. Kethral changed the display to show the personal weapons stored in the armory. There were thousands of them, projectile weapons of every size and type, energy weapons, explosive devices, edged weapons, chemical weapons, weapons designed to pierce armor, weapons designed to shatter bones, weapons designed to burn flesh. "Every human on the ship is assigned at least one personal weapon," Kethral explained. "Most carry several. The captain, for example, carries a projectile pistol in a holster on her hip, a smaller backup weapon in her boot, and a bladed weapon called a knife on her belt. She is considered lightly armed by human standards. The diplomats carry weapons. Everyone carries weapons, Ambassador. The cooks, the medical staff, the maintenance workers, all of them. Weapons training is mandatory for all human military personnel, regardless of their primary role." Thyras thought back to her meeting with Captain Chen. The human had seemed so friendly, so harmless. Had she really been carrying deadly weapons the entire time they were talking? Had those warm hands that clasped Thyras's crystalline appendage been trained to kill? "There is more," Kethral said reluctantly. "I scanned their emergency protocols, the procedures they follow in crisis situations. And..." Kethral pulled up a text document, translated from the human language into Velkari script. "This is their procedure for responding to a hull breach in space." Thyras read the document, her crystal form growing darker with every line. "In the event of a hull breach, all personnel are to immediately move to seal the breach using whatever materials are available. If sealing materials are not available, personnel are authorized to use their own bodies to plug small breaches while waiting for repair teams to arrive. Personnel can survive in vacuum for up to 2 minutes by holding their breath and remaining calm. Sacrificing one crew member to seal a breach is acceptable if it saves the ship and the rest of the crew. They expect their people to plug hull breaches with their own bodies," Thyras whispered. "Yes, Ambassador, and according to their training manuals, many humans have actually done this successfully. They can hold their breath for several minutes, even in vacuum. Their bodies are resilient enough to withstand the pressure differential for short periods." Thyras read further, finding sections on fire suppression, toxic atmosphere containment, and combat damage response. Every protocol followed the same basic philosophy. Do whatever is necessary to save the ship and the crew, even if it means sacrificing individual lives. One phrase appeared repeatedly throughout the documents: acceptable losses. What does this term mean? Thyras asked. Acceptable losses. Kethral's crystals went dark. It is a military concept, ambassador. It refers to the number of casualties that commanders consider acceptable in order to achieve an objective. Humans calculate in advance how many of their people they are willing to lose, and then proceed with operations regardless of those expected deaths. Thyras felt sick. They planned for their own people to die. Yes, they factor death into their strategic calculations. They train their soldiers to accept the possibility of death as part of their duty. And when soldiers die, the survivors continue fighting. They do not stop. They do not surrender. They simply keep going. But surely they mourn their dead. Surely the loss of life affects them. Oh yes, humans feel deep grief when their companions die. Their emotional bonds are incredibly strong, perhaps stronger than any species we have encountered. They love deeply, passionately, completely. And when someone they love dies, the pain is devastating. Then how can they keep fighting? How can they endure such loss? Kethral was quiet for a long moment. I believe that is exactly why they keep fighting, Ambassador. They continue not despite their grief, but because of it. They fight to honor the dead. They fight to protect the living. They fight because giving up would mean that all those who died before them died for nothing. Thyras stood in silence, processing this information. It painted a picture of a species that was not simply dangerous but fundamentally different from anything the conquered had ever encountered. Humans were not mindless killers. They loved, they grieved, they formed deep bonds with each other. But that love, that capacity for connection, did not make them weak. It made them stronger. It gave them something to fight for. "Show me their training records," Thyras said finally. Kethral hesitated. "Ambassador, I am not sure that is wise. The training records are disturbing." "Show me." The display changed to show footage from human military training exercises. Thyras watched in horrified fascination as humans ran through simulated combat scenarios. They were fast, faster than she had expected. They moved with precision and coordination, communicating through hand signals and brief verbal commands. They used their weapons with frightening accuracy, hitting targets at distances that should have been impossible. But what disturbed Thyras most was what happened when things went wrong in the simulations. In one scenario, a simulated enemy attack killed half of the human team. The surviving humans did not panic. They did not freeze. They simply adjusted their tactics and kept fighting. They used their dead companions' bodies for cover. They stripped weapons and ammunition from the fallen and redistributed them among the survivors. They fought their way out of the ambush and completed their objective. In another scenario, a human soldier was wounded by simulated enemy fire. Unable to move, he ordered his teammates to leave him behind and complete the mission. They refused. Instead, one soldier stayed with the wounded man, providing covering fire, while the others flanked the enemy position and destroyed it. Then they came back for their fallen comrade. "They never leave their people behind," Thyras observed. "No, Ambassador. It is one of their most sacred principles. They will risk everything, even their own lives, to recover their wounded and their dead. They call it leaving no one behind. Even if it means losing more people in the process. Even then, they believe that knowing they will never be abandoned gives their soldiers the courage to fight harder, and the evidence suggests they are correct. Human morale remains high even in the most difficult circumstances, because each soldier trusts completely that their companions will never give up on them." Thyras watched more training footage. She saw humans pushing their bodies to the point of collapse, then getting up and continuing. She saw them enduring pain that would have incapacitated most species. She saw them helping each other, encouraging each other, driving each other to perform beyond what seemed possible. And through it all, she saw something else. Something that made her crystalline form pulse with an emotion she could not quite name. She saw hope. The humans trained so hard not because they wanted to kill, but because they wanted to protect. They endured pain so that others would not have to. They sacrificed themselves so that their companions might live. Every brutal exercise, every punishing drill, every simulated death was in service of a single goal, keeping their people alive. "Kethril," Thyras said slowly, "I want you to scan the human ship for one more thing." "What, Ambassador?" "Their medical facilities. Show me how they care for their wounded." Kethril adjusted the scanners and a new image appeared on the display. The human medical bay was surprisingly large, much larger than Thyras had expected for a ship of this size. It was equipped with advanced technology, multiple operating rooms, and dozens of beds. Supplies were stacked high along the walls: bandages, medicines, surgical instruments, blood reserves. "They have devoted significant resources to medical care," Kethril observed. "The medical staff makes up nearly 10% of the crew." 10%, that is extraordinary. Yes, most military vessels in the Concord allocate perhaps 2 or 3% of crew to medical functions. Humans allocate 3 to 4 times that amount. Thyras studied the medical bay's equipment. Much of it was designed for trauma treatment, repairing the kind of damage that occurred in combat. There were machines for replacing lost blood, devices for reattaching severed limbs, systems for keeping critically wounded patients alive long enough to reach proper hospitals. "They expect to be wounded," Thyras said. "They plan for it, and they have built an entire infrastructure to ensure that wounded soldiers can be saved." "Yes, Ambassador, the humans have a saying, 'We leave no one behind.' It applies not only to the dead but to the wounded as well. A human soldier who is injured in combat knows that their companions will do everything possible to save them. This knowledge, according to their psychological studies, significantly improves combat effectiveness." Thyras felt something shift in her understanding of humans. Yes, they were dangerous. Yes, they carried weapons everywhere and trained constantly for combat. Yes, they were capable of terrible violence. But they were also capable of incredible compassion. They built hospitals alongside armories. They trained medics alongside warriors. They devoted enormous resources to saving lives, even as they prepared to take them. They were walking contradictions, killers and healers, destroyers and protectors, monsters and heroes, all wrapped up in soft skin and warm smiles. "I need to speak with Captain Chen again," Thyras said. "Arrange another meeting." "Ambassador, are you certain that is wise, after everything we have learned?" "That is precisely why I need to speak with her. I have learned what humans are capable of. Now I need to understand what they choose to do with that capability." Kethril's green crystals flickered with uncertainty, but he bowed his head in acceptance. "I will make the arrangements, Ambassador." As Thyras left the scanner bay, her mind was racing. The Galactic Concord had maintained peace for 9,000 years through careful diplomacy and mutual cooperation. But what happened when a species appeared that could not be defeated through conventional means? What happened when the balance of power shifted? The humans had not come to the galaxy seeking conquest. They had come seeking friendship. But Thyras knew that friendship with such a species would never be simple. Humans were too powerful, too resilient, too determined. Any relationship with them would have to be built on a foundation of mutual respect and trust. And trust, Thyras knew, was earned through actions, not words. She needed to show the humans that the Conquered was worthy of their friendship. She needed to demonstrate that the galaxy's other species could be trusted, could be relied upon, could be part of the human family that Kethril had described. It would be the most important diplomatic mission of her career. Perhaps the most important diplomatic mission in the history of the Galactic Concord. Because if she failed, if the humans decided that the Conquered was not worthy of their protection, or worse, that it was a threat to be eliminated. Then everything the galaxy had built over 9,000 years would come crashing down. The humans were coming, and the conquered would have to change to accommodate them. The only question was whether that change would come through cooperation or conquest. Back in the scanner bay, Kethral continued his analysis of the human ship. He had one more scan to complete, a cultural analysis that would help him understand how humans thought, what they valued, what motivated them. What he found kept him awake for the next 40 hours, his green crystals pulsing with equal parts fascination and terror. Because the humans had not just brought weapons on their first contact mission, they had also brought gifts, coffee and chocolate, yes, but also something else. They had brought music. Thousands of hours of human music, representing every culture and era of their history. Songs of love and loss, of triumph and tragedy, of hope and despair. Battle hymns and lullabies, anthems and dirges. The entire emotional range of the human experience encoded in sound. Kethral listened to a piece of music called Ode to Joy and felt his crystalline form resonating with an emotion he had never experienced before. He listened to something called Blues and felt a deep sadness that seemed to come from somewhere beyond himself. He listened to war drums and felt his pulse quicken with an instinct he did not know he possessed. The humans had not just evolved to hunt and kill. They had evolved to create beauty, to express the full range of their emotions through art and music and story, to reach across the vast emptiness of space and touch the hearts of species they had never met. Kethral sat in the scanner bay, surrounded by data about weapons and combat training and acceptable losses, and he wept crystalline tears, not from fear, but from something else entirely. He wept because he had just discovered that the most dangerous species in the galaxy was also, perhaps, the most beautiful. And he had no idea what that meant for the future. Kethral had not slept in 3 days. His green crystalline form had gone dull from exhaustion, but he could not stop reading. The humans had shared their cultural database as a gesture of goodwill, and Kethral had been studying it obsessively. What he found there was the most terrifying thing he had ever encountered. Not weapons, not biological data, not combat training. History. Human history was a nightmare. Kethral sat in his private study, surrounded by holographic displays showing timeline after timeline of human events. Wars, plagues, famines, genocides, natural disasters, technological catastrophes. The list seemed endless. The Galactic conquered had not experienced a major internal conflict in 9,000 years. The last war between conquered species had been a brief territorial dispute that killed fewer than 10,000 people. It was considered the darkest moment in conquered history. Humans had killed 10,000 people by breakfast on an average day during something called World War II. Kethral pulled up the records of that conflict. It had lasted 6 years and resulted in over 70 million deaths. 70 million. The number was almost incomprehensible. Cities had been burned to ash. Entire populations had been systematically murdered in factories built specifically for that purpose. 2 nuclear weapons had been dropped on civilian targets, killing hundreds of thousands of people in seconds. And this was not even their worst war. It was just the most recent major one. Before World War II, there had been World War I. Before that, countless other conflicts stretching back to the beginning of recorded history. Humans had been killing each other for as long as they had existed. They had developed entire academic disciplines dedicated to studying violence, history, military science, weapons engineering, tactics, strategy. They had created art and literature about war. They had built monuments to commemorate their dead. They had even created games based on war, games for children. Kethral pulled up records of human children playing something called cops and robbers or soldiers. From their earliest years, humans practiced violence. They learned to fight, to compete, to win at any cost. By the time they reached adulthood, Conflict was woven into the very fabric of their thinking. But what truly horrified Kethral was not the violence itself. It was what the violence had produced. Every major human technological advancement had come from war. The internet, which now connected billions of humans across their planet, had been developed as a military communication system. The jet engines that powered their aircraft had been created to build better weapons. Their medical technology, which could now save lives that would have been lost just centuries earlier, had advanced primarily through the study of battlefield injuries. Even their food preservation techniques had been developed to feed armies on the march. Nuclear power, rocketry, satellite communication, GPS navigation, radar, computers, all of it had military origins. Humans did not innovate for the sake of innovation. They innovated because they were afraid of each other. They built better weapons because their neighbors were building better weapons. They developed better medicine because their soldiers kept getting wounded. They created better communication systems because they needed to coordinate their wars more effectively. Fear and violence had driven human progress for their entire history. And yet, Kethral pulled up another section of the human database. This one contained their art. He spent hours looking at human paintings. He saw images of terrible beauty, landscapes that captured the light of their sun, portraits that seemed to reveal the souls of their subjects, abstract compositions that evoked emotions he could not name. He saw works created during the darkest periods of human history, art that somehow found beauty in the midst of horror. He read human literature, poems about love and loss, stories about heroism and sacrifice, plays that explored the deepest questions of existence. He read words written by people who had lived through wars and plagues and disasters, people who had every reason to despair, and yet they had chosen to create beauty instead. He listened to more human music, symphonies that took his breath away, folk songs that made him weep, hymns of hope sung by people who had nothing left to hope for. The humans were monsters, but they were also artists. They were killers, but they were also dreamers. They destroyed, but they also created. Kethral found records of human charitable organizations, groups dedicated to helping the poor, the sick, the displaced. He found evidence of humans risking their lives to save strangers. He found stories of enemies becoming friends, of former soldiers working together to rebuild what they had destroyed. After every war, the humans built again. After every disaster, they recovered. No matter how much they suffered, no matter how many they lost, they refused to give up. They kept fighting. They kept creating. They kept hopping. Kethral pulled up records of something called the Marshall Plan. After World War II, the humans who had won the war had given enormous amounts of money and resources to rebuild the nations they had just defeated. They had helped their former enemies become prosperous again. They had turned devastated countries into trading partners and allies. It made no sense. Why would anyone help rebuild an enemy they had just spent years trying to destroy? Kethral found the answer in a speech given by a human leader named George Marshall. The humans had realized that lasting peace could not be achieved through victory alone. Crushing an enemy only created resentment and the seeds of future conflict. True peace required helping the defeated rebuild, giving them a stake in the new order, turning enemies into friends. The humans had learned this lesson through thousands of years of warfare. They had discovered, through bitter experience, that the only way to end the cycle of violence was to extend a hand to those they had defeated. They were capable of terrible destruction, but they were also capable of remarkable generosity. Kethral found records of human emergency response to natural disasters. When earthquakes struck, humans from around the world sent aid. When tsunamis hit, rescue teams arrived within hours. When famines threatened, food was shipped across oceans. Humans who had nothing in common with the victims, different countries, different languages, different beliefs, dropped everything to help. They called it humanitarian aid. The word itself was significant, humanitarian, based on the word human, as if helping others in need was the defining characteristic of their species. But how could that be true? How could a species capable of genocide also be capable of such compassion? How could the same creatures who had dropped nuclear bombs on cities also build organizations dedicated to feeding the hungry? Kethrel searched the database for answers and found them in human philosophy and religion. Humans had spent thousands of years struggling with the darkness inside themselves. They had created entire systems of thought dedicated to understanding their own violent nature and finding ways to control it. They had developed codes of ethics, rules of warfare, principles of justice, all designed to channel their destructive impulses into less harmful directions. They knew what they were. They had looked into the abyss of their own souls and seen the monster that lived there, and instead of surrendering to that monster, they had chosen to fight it. Every human religion, Kethrel discovered, emphasized the importance of controlling destructive impulses. Every human philosophy grappled with questions of good and evil, right and wrong. Every human culture had developed rules and taboos designed to limit violence and promote cooperation. The humans were at war with themselves, not just with each other but with their own nature. They were constantly struggling against the darkness inside them, constantly trying to be better than their instincts demanded. And sometimes they succeeded. Kethrel found records of human soldiers who had refused to fire on unarmed civilians, even when ordered to do so. He found stories of enemies helping each other survive impossible circumstances. He found evidence of compassion in the midst of the most brutal conflicts, soldiers sharing food with prisoners, medics treating wounded enemies, warriors honoring the dead on both sides. The humans were not simply violent. They were conflicted. They were torn between their worst impulses and their highest ideals. Every day, every human faced the choice between destruction and creation, hatred and love, despair and hope. And enough of them chose hope to keep their civilization alive. Kethrel put down the database and sat in silence for a long time. His green crystals had gone dim with exhaustion and emotional overload. He had learned more about humans in the past 3 days than most species learned about themselves in centuries. And he still did not understand them. How could creatures so capable of evil also be so capable of good? How could killers also be healers? How could destroyers also be creators? The answer, Kethrel finally realized, was that humans were not one thing or the other. They were both. They contained within themselves the full spectrum of possibility, from the darkest evil to the brightest good. Every human was capable of becoming either a monster or a hero, depending on the choices they made. And somehow, despite everything, enough of them chose to be heroes. Kethrel thought about the implications of this discovery. The Galactic Conquered had always believed that violence was a primitive trait that species outgrew as they became more civilized. The Conquered's own history seemed to support this idea. As species advanced technologically and socially, they became less violent, more cooperative, more peaceful. But humans were different. They had achieved incredible technological advancement without outgrowing their violent nature. They had built a civilization that spanned a planet, developed weapons capable of destroying their entire world, and still they had not stopped fighting. And yet they had also not destroyed themselves. That was the truly remarkable thing. Humans had possessed nuclear weapons for nearly a century. They could have wiped out their entire species at any time, but they had chosen not to. Despite their conflicts, despite their wars, despite the terrible things they did to each other, they had always stopped short of complete annihilation. They had looked into the abyss and chosen to step back. Maybe, Kethrel thought, that was the true measure of a species. Not whether they were capable of violence, any species could be violent, but whether they could control that violence, whether they could face their own darkest nature and choose to be better. By that measure, humans were perhaps the most remarkable species the galaxy had ever seen. They were monsters who had chosen to be kind. Kethril activated his communication device and requested a meeting with Ambassador Thyrus. He needed to share what he had learned. The ambassador was preparing for another meeting with the human delegation, and she needed to understand what she was dealing with. Not dangerous animals to be contained. Not innocent children to be protected. Something far more complex and far more remarkable than either. Humans were the galaxy's first truly free species, free to choose between destruction and creation, between hate and love, between death and life. And for thousands of years, despite everything, they had kept choosing life. If the Galactic Concord could harness that capacity for choice, if they could help humans channel their incredible potential toward positive ends, the results could be extraordinary. But if they failed, if they treated humans as threats to be contained or primitives to be controlled, the consequences could be catastrophic. Humans did not respond well to being controlled. Their entire history was a record of resistance against tyranny, of rebellion against oppression, of fighting for freedom at any cost. The conquered needed to approach humans as equals, as partners, as potential allies in whatever challenges the future might bring. Because one thing was certain, with humans in the galaxy, everything was about to change. Kethril reviewed his notes one last time before going to meet with Ambassador Thyrus. He had organized his findings into a comprehensive report, but he knew that no report could truly capture what he had learned. The humans were coming. They brought with them the capacity for terrible destruction and incredible creation. They brought their weapons and their art, their violence and their compassion, their darkness and their light. They were a species at war with itself, and that war had produced wonders beyond anything the conquered had ever imagined. Now the question was simple: which side of human nature would the galaxy see? The answer, Kethril suspected, depended entirely on how the conquered chose to receive them. He took a deep breath and headed to the ambassador's chamber. The most important conversation in galactic history was about to begin. And Kethril still did not know whether to be terrified or hopeful. Perhaps both. Perhaps that was the only appropriate response to humanity. As he walked through the corridors of the Harmony of Stars, Kethril passed a viewport that showed the human ship floating peacefully alongside them. The Perseverance looked small against the vast backdrop of stars, small and fragile and utterly unimpressive. But Kethril now knew better. That small ship carried creatures who had survived ice ages and plagues and wars, creatures who had split the atom and walked on their moon and reached for the stars, creatures who had stared into the darkness of their own souls and refused to surrender, creatures who might just be the most important species the galaxy had ever known. Kethril quickened his pace. He had much to tell Ambassador Thyrus, and very little time to help her understand. Ambassador Thyrus had called an emergency meeting of all senior conquered representatives. The conference chamber was filled with delegates from a dozen species, all waiting to hear what she had learned about the humans. The air was thick with tension. Grath, the Morathi security chief, had already made his opinion clear. "These creatures are too dangerous to allow into the conquered," he growled. His reptilian scales had turned dark with agitation. "Their biology, their weapons, their history, everything about them speaks of violence. We should quarantine their system and prevent them from spreading further into the galaxy." "I agree," said Magistrate Velen, the elderly Verdani representative. Her plant-like body rustled with displeasure. "We have maintained peace for 9,000 years. We cannot risk everything we have built on a species that has never stopped fighting." Other voices joined the chorus. The representative from the Brel Collective suggested strict monitoring of all human activities. The delegate from the Crystal Consortium proposed limiting human expansion to a small sector of space. Several species mentioned the possibility of preemptive military action. Thyras listened to all of them in silence. She had expected this reaction. Everything they had learned about humans pointed toward danger. Any rational assessment would conclude that humanity was a threat to be contained. But Thyras had spoken with Kethril. She had reviewed his findings, and she had seen something in those records that the others had missed. When the voices finally quieted, Thyras stood and addressed the assembly. "I have heard your concerns," she said, her blue crystal form glowing with calm authority. "They are valid. Humans are, by any measure, the most dangerous species we have ever encountered. Their biology makes them almost impossible to defeat. Their weapons could devastate our worlds. Their history shows a capacity for violence that defies comprehension." She paused, letting her words sink in. But their history also shows something else. It shows that humans have spent thousands of years fighting against their own violent nature. It shows that they have built hospitals alongside armories, schools alongside weapons factories, art galleries alongside military bases. It shows that they have created beauty in the midst of horror and hope in the face of despair. Grath snorted dismissively. "Pretty words, Ambassador, but they do not change the fundamental fact: humans are killers." "Yes," Thyras agreed. "They are killers, but they are also healers. They are destroyers, but also creators. They are capable of the worst evil, but also the greatest good. The question is not what humans are capable of. We know that all too well. The question is what they choose to do with that capability." "And how can we predict their choices?" asked Magistrate Velen. "Their history shows no consistent pattern. They swing from war to peace and back again without warning." "You are correct," Thyras said. "We cannot predict human choices with certainty, but we can influence them. We can give humans a reason to choose peace over war, cooperation over conflict. We can show them that the galaxy offers friendship and opportunity, not threat and competition." "And if they reject our friendship," Grath demanded, "then we will have lost nothing. But if they accept it, if we can bring humans into the Conquered as true partners, we will have gained the most powerful ally the galaxy has ever seen." Thyras activated a holographic display showing Kethril's analysis of human potential. "Look at what humans have accomplished in just a few centuries of industrial development. They have gone from horse-drawn carriages to spacecraft, from handwritten letters to instantaneous global communication, from primitive medicine to organ transplantation. Their rate of advancement is unprecedented. If they continue at this pace, within a few generations, they will surpass every species in the Conquered." "All the more reason to stop them now," Grath said. "All the more reason to make them our friends," Thyras countered. "Consider the alternative. If we quarantine humans, restrict them, treat them as enemies, what do you think will happen? Based on everything we know about their nature, they will fight. They will resist. They will eventually break free of any constraints we impose. And when they do, they will remember how we treated them." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what humans were capable of when they felt threatened. "But if we welcome them," Thyras continued, "if we offer them a place in the galactic community, if we treat them with respect and fairness, they will remember that too. Humans are fiercely loyal to those they consider friends. They will fight to the death for those they love. If we can earn their loyalty, their friendship, their love, we will never have to fear them again." "You are asking us to take an enormous risk," Magistrate Velen said slowly. "You are asking us to trust creatures who have never been trustworthy, even to each other." "Yes," Thyras admitted, "it is a risk, perhaps the greatest risk the Conquered has ever faced, but I believe it is a risk worth taking." She turned off the display and faced the assembly directly. "I have spoken with Captain Chen. I have looked into her eyes. I have felt the warmth of her hand when we greeted each other, and I have seen something that gives me hope." "What did you see?" asked the Brel representative. "I saw someone who wants to do good, someone who has the power to destroy but chooses to create, someone who carries weapons but dreams of peace. I saw a human, not a monster, not an angel, but a person struggling to be better than her instincts demand. One person cannot represent an entire species, Grath objected. No, Thyras agreed, but she can show us what that species is capable of becoming. And if one human can choose kindness over cruelty, then perhaps others can as well. Perhaps with our help many others can. The assembly debated for several more hours. Fears were expressed, concerns were raised, alternatives were discussed. But in the end, Thyrus's argument prevailed. The Galactic Concord would not quarantine humanity. They would not restrict human expansion or threaten military action. They would welcome humans into the galactic community as equal partners. It was the most important decision in Concord history. And now Thyrus stood at the airlock, waiting to deliver the news personally. The human delegation was scheduled to arrive in minutes. Thyrus had requested a final meeting before the formal acceptance ceremony. She wanted to speak with Captain Chen privately, to explain what the decision had meant, to lay the foundation for the relationship she hoped would follow. Around her, the rest of the Concord delegation waited nervously. Grath was there, his hand never far from his weapon. Kethril stood in the back, his green crystals pulsing with a mixture of fear and fascination. Other representatives from various species filled the room, all watching the airlock with apprehension. The indicator light turned green. The airlock door began to open. And Thyrus felt her heart, or whatever passed for a heart in her crystalline body, begin to beat faster. Captain Sarah Chen stepped through the airlock first. She was wearing her formal uniform, decorated with the small metal badges that represented her achievements. Her brown hair was neatly arranged, her posture straight and confident. She looked like what she was, a military officer representing her people. But when her eyes met Thyrus's, something changed. The formality melted away, replaced by something warmer, something genuine. "Ambassador Thyrus," the captain said, stepping forward, "thank you for inviting us back. We were beginning to worry that something was wrong." "There was much to discuss," Thyrus admitted. "Your arrival has raised many questions among the Concord members, questions that required careful consideration." "I understand. We knew this would not be simple." Behind the captain, 4 other humans entered the room. Thyrus recognized them from the previous meeting: Lieutenant Commander Harris, the young officer who had been so fascinated by the crystal sculptures, and 3 others whose names she had not yet learned. They carried a large container between them. "We brought more gifts," Captain Chen explained. "We thought, well, we hoped that we might have something to celebrate today." "You were correct to hope," Thyrus said. She felt her crystal form beginning to glow with warmth. "The Galactic Concord has reached a decision. We would like to formally invite humanity to join our community as equal partners. You will have full rights and privileges, including access to all Concord technology, trade routes, and diplomatic channels." For a moment, Captain Chen did not respond. She stood perfectly still, her eyes wide with what could only be described as shock. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face, that strange human expression that Thyrus was beginning to understand. "Ambassador Thyrus," the captain said, her voice thick with emotion, "you have no idea what this means to us. We have dreamed of this moment for generations. We looked up at the stars and wondered if we were alone, if anyone else was out there, if we would ever find friends among the infinite darkness. And now—" She stopped, unable to continue. Her eyes glistened with moisture, tears. Thyrus remembered. Humans leaked water from their eyes when they felt strong emotions. "We are honored," Captain Chen finally managed to say. "Deeply, profoundly honored. We promise that humanity will be a worthy member of the Concord. We will contribute everything we can, our technology, our resources, our knowledge. And we will stand with you against any threat, any challenge, any enemy." "We know you will," Thyrus said. "We have studied your history, Captain. We know what humans do for those they consider friends." Something flickered in Chen's eyes at those words, a recognition that the conquered had not made this decision blindly, that they understood exactly what humanity was capable of, the good and the bad. "You have seen our history," the captain said quietly. "All of it." "All of it," Thyras confirmed. "Your wars, your genocides, your weapons of mass destruction. We have seen the darkness inside your species, Captain. We know what humans can do when they choose violence." The room had gone very quiet. The other humans stood frozen, their eyes fixed on Thyras. They knew how this conversation could go. "But we also saw something else," Thyras continued. "We saw your art and your music. We saw your hospitals and your charities. We saw the way you help strangers in need, the way you rebuild after disasters, the way you fight to protect those you love. We saw the humanity inside your violence." She stepped closer to Captain Chen, close enough to see the individual hairs on her head, the small imperfections in her skin, the slight tremble in her hands. "We know what you are, Captain. You are monsters who have chosen to be kind. You are killers who dream of peace. You are the most dangerous species the galaxy has ever seen, and also perhaps the most beautiful." Tears were flowing freely down Chen's face now. She made no effort to hide them. "We will not pretend to be better than we are," she said. "We are everything you described. We have darkness inside us that we cannot deny. We will make mistakes. We will sometimes fail to live up to our ideals. We will disappoint you." "We know," Thyras said. "But we will try," Chen continued. "Every day, every moment we will try to be better. That is all we can promise. Not perfection, not sainthood, just the constant effort to choose light over darkness, love over hate, life over death." "That is enough," Thyras said. "That is more than enough." She extended her crystalline appendage in the human gesture of greeting. Chen reached out and took it, her warm hand wrapping around the cool crystal. They stood like that for a long moment, two species connected across the vast gulf of evolution and history. Then Chen laughed, a sound that surprised everyone in the room. "I almost forgot," she said, turning to the container her crew had carried in. "We brought gifts, proper gifts this time, not just coffee and chocolate." Lieutenant Commander Harris opened the container, revealing dozens of carefully wrapped packages. Books, music recordings, art prints, seeds from earth plants, samples of human food, and at the bottom something that made Thyras's crystal form pulse with unexpected emotion. It was a small flag, made of fabric, showing a blue planet against a field of black space. "This is Earth," Chen explained. "Our home. We wanted you to have something that represents who we are, not just our weapons or our technology, but our world, the place that made us, the place we are fighting to protect." Thyras took the flag carefully. It was soft and light, nothing like the crystalline materials her species used. But there was something profound about holding this simple piece of fabric. It represented billions of humans, thousands of years of history, dreams and hopes and fears beyond counting. "Thank you," Thyras said. "This means more than you know." "And thank you," Chen replied, "for giving us a chance, for seeing past our darkness to whatever light exists within us. We will not forget this kindness, Ambassador. None of us will." The formal ceremony took place several hours later. Representatives from all 12 conquered species gathered to witness humanity's acceptance into the galactic community. Documents were signed, speeches were given, promises were made. It was the beginning of a new era. But Thyras found herself thinking not about the ceremony, but about the private conversation she had shared with Captain Chen, about the tears in the human's eyes and the tremor in her voice, about the desperate hope that humanity might finally have found a place in the universe where they belonged. Humans were monsters. That truth had not changed. But they were also something else, something remarkable and terrifying and beautiful all at once. They were creatures who had stared into the abyss of their own nature and refused to surrender. Creatures who kept choosing hope even when despair would have been easier. Maybe that was what the galaxy needed. Not another peaceful species content to maintain the status quo. Not another culture satisfied with quiet prosperity. But something wilder, more dangerous, more alive. Something that would push the conquered to be better, to grow, to face challenges it had been avoiding for 9,000 years. Humans were a risk, the greatest risk the conquered had ever taken. But looking at Captain Chen's tearful smile, at the flag of Earth clutched in her own crystalline hands, Thyris felt something she had not felt in centuries. Hope. Perhaps the monsters who chose kindness were exactly what the galaxy needed. The future stretched out before them, vast and unknown and full of possibility. Whatever came next, whatever challenges arose, whatever conflicts emerged, whatever triumphs or tragedies awaited, one thing was certain. The humans were here, and the galaxy would never be the same. In the years that followed, historians would look back on this moment as the turning point, the day when humanity joined the stars, the day when everything changed. But for now, in the quiet aftermath of the ceremony, Thyris simply stood at the viewport and watched the human ship floating peacefully beside the harmony of stars. Two vessels from two different worlds, two different histories, two different ways of being alive. Yet somehow, despite everything, finding a way to exist together. Perhaps that was the real lesson of human history. Not that violence was inevitable, but that connection was possible. Not that darkness was inescapable, but that light could be chosen. The humans had spent thousands of years learning that lesson. Now they were here to share it with the galaxy. And Thyris, for the first time in her long life, felt truly optimistic about the future. The monsters had arrived, and they had brought hope with them. The stars had never seemed brighter.